what you have to sell is the dream. You've got to sell the vision. You've got to sell the future potential of what it could be. And what's helped us is, like, football have done it, and all these other women's sports have proved that actually with attention, if you add the value there, that there is so many returns to be gained. And for me, I realised really early on that to get people on board on our journey, I've got to make them feel the passion that we feel for this sport.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Borders, and I'm your host, Andrew Fay. And in this podcast, we talk about the exciting challenges of taking your business globally. And we do that by speaking to business leaders to see what we can learn from their experiences. We speak to service providers who have products and services that can help make our lives easier. And sometimes we just speak to really talented, amazing people to see what we can learn from them and adopt into our own lives. And the latter is what we're going to be doing today. And the subject we're going to be focusing on today is we as global business leaders, what can we learn from people in elite level leadership in sport? And to help us with that conversation, we've got two very special guests. We've got Jodie Cunningham and Emily Rudge. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us.
No problem. So I'd like to start people off really easy. And I'm not sure how we want to do this. So take it in turns. You guys.
I could probably tell her story. She could probably tell mine.
So you two should be more coordinated than me anyway. So your call. But just to start off, just tell me your story. How did you end up here today?
I think, well, you go first because you started first.
So I just started playing rugby league when I was in primary school, sort of fell into that, loved the sport and then just carried on from there, really, never looked back. So then played with the boys because I was like only 10, so girls played with boys at that age. Then at age 12, you play for a girls team, but at that time there was not really any girls teams out there available, so you had to travel quite far. That's sort of like when your story comes into it, is that we started in high school, that's when me and Jodie met, and then that's when you first started playing, wasn't it? So we sort of formed a bit of a girls team in school. Then we took that into creating the first ever Warrington girls team. And then from there, we played at Thatto Heath, and then now we play for St. Helens. And we both play for England as well. So we've sort of grew as part of the sport, and the sport's grown with us as well. So it's definitely a lot bigger and better now than it was when we first started playing.
Yeah, and to be honest, I owe Emily everything really for getting me playing, because like we instantly were in all the same classes together when we went to high school, really close mates, and I think it's a bit of fate. Like we have been really lucky with how things have landed. The year we started high school was the year they started the Champion Schools tournament for girls. So before that point, no girls in school before us could have played in this tournament. There wasn't a tournament for them to play in. So there wasn't really any girls' schools teams. Yeah. And the year we started was the year they decided, right, okay, we need a girls' tournament as well. And that was where, like, Emily obviously was really keen on just rallying around. She was the only one who'd played before, but managed to do some real good convincing to get a full team together. And I took probably the longest to convince, because I don't even think it was the fact that rugby league is really physical, and that's a little bit crazy to some people, to run at people as hard as you can and get hit as hard as you can. Some people think that's crazy. It was more probably a bit of the fear of unknown, of maybe not being very good, because I did lots of sports and this was so different and so new that I was probably a little bit scared of being rubbish. But she convinced me, and we went on to be 4 times national champions of that competition. And like Emily said, our parents were so keen and supportive that actually they created a team for us in Warrington, and it sort of went from there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited. And that journey from sort of high school and sort of rallying around and creating a team to now representing your country, there's a, paraphrase, but huge amounts of stuff that went on there. And when we look at parallels and similarities between sport and business, resilience, perseverance, the sort of ability to have a goal and stick to it, probably are the most common ones. And to achieve the elite level that you have, is there any stories you can share of resilience where maybe you thought it wasn't going to happen and you had to overcome challenges?
I think you probably more so like when you had your injury before we were going to a World Cup. So it was like a real big sort of point in our career, and you ended up getting injured, didn't you, sort of before that? So that I think was a real struggle and challenge for you.
Yeah, I think injuries in sport are really tough, and everyone goes through ups and downs, and I don't think, my family definitely didn't appreciate injuries in sport. You see it all the time, whatever sport you're into, you watch it on television and you'll see like X player ruled out for whatever reason. And that could be in a World Cup tournament, it could be in an Olympics, and it's a byline and then it's move on. And I think that's one of the things my dad said he notices so much now because of what I went through during that time. And me and Emily are really lucky. So we say that there was no girls around. We didn't even know there was really women's teams. So we had a coach who came down and said to us, if you two stick at it, I think you could play for England one day. And, we clearly had a good eye because we both, by the age of 17, had gone on and represented England and have played together at England ever since. And to be honest, when I first got in, I didn't in any way feel good enough to be there. I'm probably a little bit more reserved than you, especially back then, you were so confident, and Emily would just slotted into that team so well. And I just felt I was really little. I'm not massive now, but I was really little at the time and probably didn't feel like I fit in there. And it took years for me to really feel like I belonged at England. And then I think just as I got there, it was the biggest World Cup we were going to have, 2017. It was going to be in Australia. First time they were going to be ran alongside the men. And then I snapped my ACL 5 months out from the World Cup. So for me, that was all I cared about. Career, everything. I'd put everything on the back burner to just focus on rugby. And then I lost my identity a little bit with that. And, lucky for me, I had supportive people around me, and against medical advice at first said, I'm not going to have an operation. I'm going to try my best to rehab and get there without an operation and see how it goes. And I think a lot of that was more, for me, my body hadn't told me yet. Everyone else told me you can't go to that World Cup, you can't play with a snapped ACL. The mental
resilience was overriding the physical resilience.
Yeah,
almost.
And at that point, a lot of people, and I had lots of conversations with people telling me you can't do this. It's a really bad decision. You're going to make yourself worse. I also had really supportive people who said, if anyone's going to do this, you can do it. So if, I'm backing you. If you put your mind to this, if anyone can make this happen, you're going to do it. And, for me, it was when I went to the specialist and he was trying to talk me out of it. And he said, look, at best, I'd give you a 5% chance. And I walked out of that room buzzing. With 5%, I walked in with no percent. So the fact that I came out with 5%, he was trying to let me down. And I was like, that's 5 in 100 people. When you put 5 into 100, you go, you only got to be one of the 5 out of 100. That felt like good odds. And, I still never really believed I'd get there, but really lucky for me. I had great, my friends were really important, my teammates really important, coaches, obviously the medical staff. And I managed to get to that World Cup, go get selected, which was tough, really tough conversations with a coach where actually, is it right to take you over somebody else when you might not be able to get through a World Cup? But it worked out. I managed to play every game. I hadn't played a game since doing my injury, so I went out there cold. Really. It was, for me, it was a World Cup I shouldn't have got that I managed to get. And I learned a lot about myself and also how I'll manage my own mental struggles, but also how I'll manage that with teammates, how I'll manage that with family as well. So, it was a big learning curve for me.
And, it sort of segues nicely. I think 5 in 100 aren't great odds. And I know. But I think that shows the level of mentality shift between people that have operate at an elite level performance, and you both have achieved so much success at a club level and at country and international level that both have had the opportunity to move into leadership and captain those teams. How did operating in that elite level environment, did that inform your leadership style? Did you have to change in any way when you moved into captaincy from being that sort of up and coming player that never thought you would get there, who's very bad at maths and probability, to actually moving into leadership?
I think for me, Roger, you're the most natural leader. Like when we were kids, our experience, I think, helped with a lot of that. But your confidence in leading people and your ability to inspire people, I think, is second to none, really. If Rudgy says something, people listen, and that's been the case since we were 12 years old. And so, Rudgy, for me, I think every team I've been in, everyone looks to you, and your voice is so powerful. And I think for me, as a teammate, that's what I look for, and I think that's a real natural quality of yours. I don't know if you feel that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I have got a lot of confidence. So it did sort of like match that sort of being in that role to be a confident person. But I think when I've mentioned this to you before, when I first got asked to be captain of England, I actually felt that I wasn't probably the right person for that role. There was another player at the time who had been captain previously, and she was still part of the team. A coach had come in and he just wanted to change things up. So he actually said, I want you to be captain rather than this other player. And I felt sort of honoured, obviously, that to be put in that position and in that role, but sort of felt like, oh God, well, she's got more experience than me. She's been captain for a number of years and now he's give that to me. I felt sort of like I didn't deserve that. So that was a bit of a challenge, sort of being in that role when you felt probably a bit awkward being in that leadership role. So
it's
I think
almost a bit like imposter syndrome, which is common in business and in sport.
Yeah. So I think I probably had to back myself when I didn't initially. But I loved being sort of captain. I loved sort of that role. I think we both do it naturally anyway, sort of because we are so experienced in the sport now anyway. And obviously we're kind of like older players, if you like. I think people do naturally look up to us for our experience and just, you know, having that, being around big games and being in that sort of pressured environment for a long time. I think people naturally look up to us anyway. So I think, you know, more sort of recent in the last couple of years, I think we have really developed in those leadership roles. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, it's more, I'm probably less of an obvious leader, but mine was more around leading by example, sort of trying to just do the little things. And again, probably similar to Rudge, at first, when given leadership roles, I was like, I'm not sure whether I'm the right person for that. Are people going to listen to me? Are people going to value what I say? Are they going to take it on board? Because I think we've probably both been around situations where maybe you can feel that the group don't necessarily listen to or take on board what the leader's saying. So, you know, that's not a nice situation to be in. But I think one for me personally is having Ruddy, like we've been through everything together. Like she got me into it and we've been through every single team together. So anytime I've had a challenge, I will come to Ruddy and be like, right, what about this? What do you think we could do in this situation? We're lucky now we often get to room together when we're on tour, when we're on camp. So we can have those discussions around, actually, I wasn't necessarily happy with that. Maybe we need to have a word with that person, or maybe let's get a group discussion or a team meeting in. So I absolutely rely on Ruddy a lot to sort of sense check a lot of the time in terms of my actions or what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do.
And that's an important team dynamic, isn't it? You know, there's lots of sort of things there which I think link back to business, and being a reluctant leader, you know, is sometimes not a bad thing. Thinking that you're not ready for this is part of the humility sometimes that you need to be at the front of that. I think having a great story, I think the fact that both, you know, anybody in that room will see what you've done and what you've achieved, it's naturally easy to follow people like that as well. And then actually having each other to sort of bounce off is really, really important. And it's, you know, not a rugby expert, but when I look at sort of rugby, it's not just the leadership things that can come into everyday life. So unity and togetherness. There's a lot of qualities in your chosen sport that help with everyday life. Does it influence your careers, your personal? Are you better people because of the disciplines you learn in your sport?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think that through rugby, that has actually given me so much confidence. Like I know Jodie mentioned before, like I've got a lot of confidence, but actually when I was a kid, before I started playing rugby, I was so shy, and nobody ever believes me when I say that. Like, you were never shy. And I was like, I was. And rugby, through like the experiences, the opportunities you get, the fact that you're sort of in an environment where, especially as girls, young girls, you're not really meant to be in that environment. You know, it wasn't really a place for girls at that time. It was very much like a male dominant environment. So, you know, you have to back yourself. You have to like have confidence in order to thrive in that environment. So yeah, through rugby, that's give me so much confidence. It has helped me develop as a leader, you know, just sort of being pushed into those positions. You do grow as a person and you find out a lot about yourself, you know, and what you're like. And I think especially in like rugby, being on a rugby field, you have to be like so tough. Like you mentioned before about being mentally tough, you have to be mentally tough and physically tough. And I think if you are to take a backward step, that then is when your sort of opponents are gonna, you know, come at you even more. So you do have to be tough. And I think that is a great quality for us, just for me in everyday life, you know, to have that mental toughness. And when you do come up against like adversity and challenges in your life, you know you're that, prepared. You're prepared, you can cope with it. You've been in those sort of high pressure environments, you know, actually, you know, I can get through this. I can achieve success even when it's hard. So I think that has definitely helped us through sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, when I was going into like, what do I want to do career-wise? Because obviously we're not full-time. Like all of the women who play have got full-time jobs and train alongside it. And it is hard to balance, and it's hard to get your experience and do other things for your job whilst you're doing that. But actually my CV was full of things that I'd learned and skills that had developed through rugby. You know, having tough conversations with each other is a natural thing in sport. You have to be able to pull each other up. You have to be able to raise the standards as a group. And that involves actually within a team, whether you're a leader or not, being able to say, come on, that's not good enough.
Respectful challenge is another one that's constantly. Really.
Yeah, we have to do that a lot. And that doesn't come natural to everybody. You know, some people are better at that. That's something I probably had to learn a little bit, is to be able to, in the right way, say, look, come on, that's not good enough. You've not done this, you've not done the other. We're a team here. We have to all be on the same page. There's all different things with that. And probably getting into like the England setup young and being forced to speak in group environments and stand up and maybe do interviews, that I didn't realise how powerful that would be when I got into the workplace, because you might have to stand up and do a presentation in front of a group of people. And that was much less daunting because actually from a young age I'd done that sort of thing. It might be
you
a different
guys have
topic.
been in selection centres since you were little kids. You know, so an interview or a podcast is just you know, water off a duck's back, really.
To be honest, you're right. Like with interviews and stuff, like even a job interview, it probably give me loads of confidence. Like I can back myself in an interview that I have so many different situations. When someone, you know, the natural questions in an interview of, can you give me a scenario when? And look, I might not be able to give you a business place one, but I've probably got hundreds that I could pull from rugby-based scenarios that are so authentic and usually provide that example really well. So 100%, I think it's given us so much. And one of the main things I think I've learned, I think my confidence has built over time, and I absolutely am so much more of a confident person now. But I think more recently, and we spoke about this quite a lot, is what rugby's provided, particularly for females, and you touched on it, that you're in a male-dominated environment from a young age of actually where people are often telling you maybe you shouldn't be here and actually, you know, girls can't play or this. So you know, you learn to fight a lot. Like we've probably had to fight more than we've realised, because also you're grateful when things change. So you don't realise you're fighting, but actually you have to fight a little bit to push the boundaries and constantly do that. And now actually we're starting to see like the rewards from that. And that's little girls coming and they've got your name on the back rather than the men's name on the back. And actually that wasn't possible before. And that's something you fought for and happened. And you can see how that benefits people. And then those girls are asking you for photos. And look, what rugby provides more than anything as women, but I think across even not women, is that ability for 80 minutes to be this really unfiltered version of yourself where you can't think, you don't have a split second on the pitch. So you are making split second decisions constantly in attack, in defence. You have to be on it all the time. And I think as a woman there, you can't be bothered that, you know, what does my hair look like? And, you know, like, you know, most of the time we've got blood pouring from us. Like it's pretty much like one of us has got black eye, broken nose, slit hair. And, you know, we come off the pitch and we do look like we've been at war. But, you know, for us, that's really powerful because we're not valued in terms of what we look like. We're valued because of what we can do on the pitch. And I think that's a really important message for everyone.
Life lesson, business lesson, sport lesson.
Particularly young girls, it's like, it doesn't matter what you look like and we shouldn't judge and perceive people on that. Actually, it's all about what you can do and what you offer and the value you bring.
I definitely want to drill into the sort of pioneering for women's sport in a little bit later on, but it's not just your teammates and each other that you can learn from. This podcast, Beyond Borders, focuses specifically on international business. And sport learns from other countries as well. Rugby league in particular, very sort of popular in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah. Have you seen in rugby league experiences and things that we've adopted from overseas cultures, processes come into your sport? Have you seen where, like in business, have you seen that happen?
Yeah, I mean, particularly I've worked at the governing body, so the RFL, over here, and I've worked at the Rugby League World Cup, which obviously learned a lot because it followed one in Australia. So we worked really closely with the NRL and the team that delivered the World Cup over there. And
the NRL are the Australian governing body?
The Australian governing body of the sport that, out there now they've just took over and they are now the number one sport in Australia. So I think it was Aussie Rules they've took over now because they're that big. So, over there, if we went out and we were playing the level we are, which is the women's NRL, out there, they are superstars and they are full-time, and the men are absolute celebrities, like, when they walk down they've got a lot of things right. So there's lots from a sense of marketing, what we deliver, what the competition looks like as a whole, rules. We are constantly changing rules in our sport, a lot of which we take from the NRL. So there's regular learning that we take because actually their resource is so much bigger than ours. And
it's seen that they're further ahead, so you're almost looking at a case study and being able to bring those experiences back. And
sometimes that's not a bad thing. You have to be open to learn, and actually if they've got the resource and are doing the work and actually, they do decide that this is the right way to go to progress the sport, well, you're probably a fool to not take on those learnings. So there's lots of different changes that across the sport from the men's and women's perspective that we take from the Southern Hemisphere and what they do. Because, they are the leaders at the minute, but we definitely want to catch up.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be lots of people copying the groundwork that you guys are putting in anyway soon. And, more of a personal question for me. This one of the most famous exports from the Southern Hemisphere, maybe from the New Zealand hack. Have you guys ever faced that? Had the opportunity
a couple of times, haven't we?
Yeah.
As daunting as it looks on TV?
I'd say it is. It's definitely like an experience to appreciate. Like, I don't think a lot of people get to actually stand right in front of that and experience that, especially before, an international game. So that is sort of an honour to have and to stand there and experience it. So you sort of
find yourself drifting out of the moment, though, a bit of a
well,
surreal.
you're sort of in awe of it, but you're also sort of like, wow, this is like, preparing us for going into like battle as such in the game. So it's like, it's sort of riling you up and, getting you going for the game, but it's sort of also, a great sort of experience, if you like, to witness that. And pretty scary as well, I think, to have, because they did sort of like come pretty close to us, didn't they, on one of them. And I think that's just a really cool thing to experience.
And it's something we do speak about because, like, look, we're really lucky. We've experienced it a few times now. And you can probably appreciate it and you're prepared for what you're going into, and that then doesn't knock you off your game. But if you're making your debut against New Zealand and you're going to face that, your nerves, your emotions, everything is so heightened at that point that can knock you a little bit. So you often talk about it as a team. What are we going to do? And I'm sure, whether you're a fan of rugby or not, you will see, videos on YouTube where different teams approach how they respond to the hacker in different ways, because actually it's them throwing the gauntlet down and saying, we're going to come at you here and we're going to give it everything. It's virtually
so
a war dance.
Proactively designing a strategy against that. Again, more similarities between sort of business and sport.
They build and they thrive off that. That's where they get all their confidence from, so that they're ready to go. At that moment, the whistle goes, they're ready to go on the pitch. So as a team, you have to talk about, right, okay, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to look straight at them? Are we going to have arms around each other? Are we going to be in a line? Is it going to be a different formation? It's often something spoken about as a team. What do we think will give us the most confidence to approach that hacker? But absolutely agree with you, Rudge. It's also an honour to be able to stand there and experience it.
It's not just best practices and processes that we can borrow from other countries like the Southern Hemisphere and how far advanced the NRL is right now, but it's rugby and any elite level sport is actually just a global leadership team. It's people, whether that's the ownership structure, whether it's the people that run the clubs, whether it's the players, the support staff. It's a multicultural environment of the best people in that elite level brought together. What does rugby league do really well in that field so people can learn from how to build those multicultural teams?
I think one of the benefits and one of the real selling points of rugby league that anyone will talk about when they're involved in it is how in touch with community it is. We are not Premier League footballers. We don't have that level of exposure, but I think there's lots of benefits that come to that. You could go to any community club and they will tell you about an ex-player or current player that comes down and helps coach or comes and presents trophies when it's the end of season awards. And we're so in touch with our communities. And that's the case of any cultural community. So there's lots of things I learned when I was working at the World Cup around there's Fijian culture in certain areas of the country. And then there's a Jamaican population in Leeds. And actually, when we're bringing Jamaica over, our rugby players are so naturally embedded in the community that they're so interested in then being part of that and going into the schools and talking about their heritage. And for me, a massive selling point that we do really well in rugby league is being in touch with our community so that we can relate to them and actually people can embrace and talk about their culture. Conrad Hurrell at Saints is so proudly Tongan and he's brilliant and he's so confident to express his culture and wear his ceremonial dress. And he turns up and he's in his flip-flops and you just think it's absolutely brilliant. And the kids love and embrace that. And because he is Conrad Hurrell, superstar, Saints player, that actually they then embrace that culture and they learn. So for me, that's one of the things I think we do really well is if you're genuinely in touch with and integrated into your community, then actually you authentically can embrace and educate around different cultures.
One of the things that's really interesting for me when I listen to you guys talk, and I've had the benefit and the luxury of watching you play and train as well, is the level and the attention to detail you put in, the planning, the preparation. And when I compare that to business, yes, it happens at a senior leadership level, but the opportunities and the effort that you guys put in to achieve success compared to what maybe a normal employee who starts a job and is just given a phone and says, there you go, start today. Just talk to us about the level of detail that goes into your lives.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love about sport is that you plan for, prepare for, and then you have immediate feedback as to whether that's worked or not. Yeah. You either win or you lose, and there is a margin of error of, you've won by 20 points or you've just beat them by 4. You get that on a regular basis. And we plan and prepare on various different scales. And I think you probably don't get the opportunity to do that in a business environment. We go, right, okay, this week we are specifically focusing on, so we've got a quarter final against Huddersfield. We are previewing them, what they do well, what they do not so well, and how we can counteract that. But then we're also going, actually, who are the teams we need to beat in order to lift the Challenge Cup, get back to Wembley? Who are the teams we need to beat to finish top of the league? So you have then more sort of medium to long-term goals for the season. We also then are planning and thinking, right, okay, what does our squad look like? What do we need next year so that we're still lifting trophies? And I think in sport, you have to be that way or you get left behind. You can't be solely in the moment all the time. As players, when you're on the pitch, yes, you're in the moment, but from a staffing perspective, from an overall team perspective, which is more my role now. So I took on a role at Saints as the head of the women's programme. So I do have to think, look, me and Ruddy would love to play forever, but we're not going to. Who's going to step into our shirts? And we have to have those more long-term plans all the time. And I think that is probably a luxury that businesses maybe don't get the opportunity to do, or maybe don't. That
real-time feedback, I've never thought of it like that before. That's you either win or you don't.
Yeah.
And so you know whether it worked or it doesn't work. In business, strategies can take years to develop, and actually there's financial elements to it, there's people elements to it. So I really like that one. And you were sort of touching on succession planning a little bit then, and I want to change tact a little bit now. So we're not the first people to talk about similarities between sports and business. Lots of people have done that. The thing that I think is interesting here, so as a CEO of a business, one of the things that I I take very seriously is that part of my job is to leave the business in a better condition when I leave it than when I found it. You know, whether that's a business, whether it's a team, whether it's a sport, that's really important. And actually, you guys are spearheading that for women's rugby league as well. So it'd be great to just hear you talk about the passion, what's happening and how you're driving this evolution.
Yeah, I think so when we first started playing, women's rugby league was very much a sort of a tiny little sport where there was very few women actually playing the sport. And it was quite hard to like find a team, a local team. It was quite hard to actually get a full team of women. So that, in comparison to what it is now, it has massively grown. And I think we're really sort of privileged to have been through the whole journey. You know, there's lots of girls who come into the sport now and just see it for what it is. Like, we're playing for a Super League team, we're playing on Sky, you know, we have great facilities, great medical care, and that's all they know because they, you know, they've come into it at a young age. We're sort of really honoured to have all that background of where it's actually come from. So I think that makes us really grateful for where the sport is now, but it also sort of makes us want to keep driving the sport further because we know how far it's come in such a short space of time. I think it's really exciting to think how much further can it go. You know, you talked about before about the NRL and like looking at those in Australia, and I think they were probably in a similar position sort of 10 years ago to what we are now. So to look at them to be full-time athletes, you know, to be like superstars over there, I think that's just creates so much exciting opportunities for our sport and for the girls that are coming through. So I think, you know, it is really important, like you say, for us as well, to leave the sport in a better place and for us to, you know, sort of drive that momentum of the sport. And we do like to always talk about the sport in such a positive way because it has been such a positive impact on our lives. So I think, you know, the more people who can be part of that and experience that, you know, the better for them and for the sport.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things I learned working at the World Cup, so I spoke about my injury before, and actually at the time that was the worst place I've ever been in. And I know that it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I had to change, I had to learn, but also so many things came off the back of that at the time I didn't realise because I wanted to, because I lost my identity, I wanted to add value. I was just like, I'll do anything. If you need someone to go talk at something, if you just send me because I just want to feel part of the team because you feel so isolated because you're not on the training field and you're not playing. And off the back of that, I actually went and did an assistant coach off the back of the 2017 World Cup said, is there any chance you can just come do a couple of minutes at this like team away day thing for the RFL? It was just reviewing the World Cup, where we want to get to. And I was like, right, okay, I had to take a day off work. I had to travel myself down to Skipton, it was, just to do a favour. But at that time, I was just like, yeah, I'll do whatever to help. Obviously, I didn't know, you know, putting myself out there, the CEO of the World Cup was in the audience at that time. And they'd already committed, we'd won the bid to host the it ended up in 22. It was supposed to be 21 World Cup. And for the first time ever, they were running men's and women's in wheelchair. I didn't know any of the context, but he came up to me afterwards and said, thought you spoke well there. You're clearly really passionate about the women's game. How would you feel about being an ambassador for the tournament? Because we know we've got to raise the profile in the build-up to this World Cup. So I was like, yeah, great, whatever.
And that's similar to the sort of Jessica Ennis-Hill role for the Olympics? That sort of type?
Yeah. So basically just when they're doing big events, big marketing pieces, we want an authentic voice of the women's game. They don't want to sell the women's game. They want someone who can. And they did the same for the wheelchair and the men's game. And off the back of that, I actually ended up working for them. That wasn't the plan. But I was just so passionate. And clearly that was where I wanted to drive all my attention. That, there was an opportunity that came up and I took it. But what I realised really early on, especially in women's sport, is I think as a general, but particularly for us in rugby league, is that you can't, on numbers, in terms of number of people buying tickets, in terms of number of people switching in or wanting to play. At the minute, the numbers aren't impressive enough when you're trying to sell that. Whether that's selling it to the governing body that actually it's willing, they need to invest more money into it, whether it's commercial partners, other businesses to want to get involved. The numbers on their own right now aren't impressive enough. But what you have to sell is the dream. You've got to sell the vision. You've got to sell the future potential of what it could be. And what's helped us is, like, football have done it. And all these other women's sports have proved that actually with attention, if you add the value there, that there is so many returns to be gained. And for me, I realised really early on that to get people on board on our journey, I've got to make them feel the passion that we feel for this sport. And I think that's the same in business. You can't always be in a place where you've got a proven, ready to go product that you're trying to sell.
But it's having a vision.
Yeah.
You know, it's any leader has to convince somebody, have to convince a business of people to follow me to something that doesn't exist yet. And that's what you guys are doing.
So you've got to be able to communicate what that looks like, but then you've also got to be able to show what you're willing to do. Like us, all the women who play the sport, especially the ones, you know, if we're going back 5, 6, 7 years, what they gave to this sport for very little return was huge. It takes over your life. You're trying to do it in and around your work. Some people are mums, parents, and that's a real hard challenge. And I think we are so passionate that actually we have to prove to other people that this is worth investing in. And you know what? People are finally listening and people are seeing the value. And I think that's, for us, really rewarding. And look, I don't know when exactly we'll hang our boots up, but I think when I do, that's one of the things I think I'll be most proud of is how many people now believe in the sport and believe in its value.
Yeah. And I think from a leadership lesson here, and I'm not sure whether you guys think about this or see this in you, but back to that sort of real time feedback. In business, as a leader, most people do it because there's the carrot at the end, whether that's financial, whether it's, I don't know, career progression, whatever that might be. You guys are doing it for a legacy that you're not going to experience. You know that? And that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? This passion, this energy, this selling story is for future generations.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think, like I said before, we have, you know, we have experienced the growth and, you know, we have benefited from that. You know, selfishly, we do get, you know, amazing things from rugby league. You know, we do it because we love the sport and we have so much enjoyment through playing. So, you know, we do get that aspect of it. But yeah, I think I 100% agree. The sport's going to grow and it's going to grow way beyond to where it is now. And we definitely won't be playing then. So yeah, there's other people that are going to definitely experience sort of the things that we've kind of made the foundations for. But I think, you know, that's just so exciting as well. And I think even when we finish playing, we'll probably still be a part of the sport in some way. And yeah, I think we always knew that was going to happen. We always knew we can't play forever and the sport is going to grow beyond after we've retired. So it's just getting it to the best place that we can whilst we're still in the sport. And then, you know, hopefully we can take a step back and watch it continue to grow. Yeah.
And as a father of a young daughter, that makes me qualified to say this on behalf of all young girls, I'm sure. But, you know, thank you for that. I think the opportunities, and if any of them are lucky enough to reach elite level, potentially the remuneration that they'll receive as a result of doing that is because of what you guys are doing today. And that is what leadership's about. It's putting the bigger vision ahead of oneself sometimes. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so we've made it to the part of the podcast now, quick fire questions. So just shoot from the hip, don't overthink them. I'll start with Emily, then Jodie, and we'll do it that way. Okay. So, most challenging opponent on the field?
I would probably go for somebody who's quite hard to get hold of. I think for rugby, you always think the hardest opponent is the person who runs the hardest.
Slippy person.
Yeah, somebody, my agility is not probably my best skill. So somebody who's really sidestep it is hard. So maybe Tara Stanley or someone like that is probably hardest to play against.
Yeah, as someone who was probably one of the smaller ones when I started playing, I'm going to go with the bigger ones. Andrea Dobson for me was always fierce competitor, so tough. but a brilliant teammate. Played with her at England, so I was always really glad when she was on our team.
Okay, good. I'll start with you this time, Jodie. A leadership lesson that rugby's taught you that you bring into your everyday life?
People first. I think if you put the person before the task, before what you're trying to achieve, and make sure you get to know them and what motivates them, I think they'll learn, they'll trust in you, they'll put the team first. So people first in pretty much every scenario.
I'd probably say setting goals, because that's probably not something that I did a lot of. And then when I was in a leadership role, I think that becomes very important, sort of set goals for yourself and for the team. So I think that definitely helped enable more success for myself by setting those goals and have something to aim towards. So I think that's something that I've probably taken into my everyday life as well. Okay,
good. Favourite city that you've played in for an international match?
I actually loved it when it wasn't a city, but the place in Papua New Guinea, Goroka, which is like a place that you cannot go as a tourist. It's like so out in the sticks, like in sort of like the
highlands,
depths of their country. Yeah. And that was just unbelievable, like in terms of like seeing the different culture and sort of their way of life, and being part of that community for like 2 weeks was just incredible. We got to play one game there, and then we played another game in Port Moresby, in Papua New Guinea. So I think that place itself was just incredible.
That is a really good one. I think more than half the town actually came to that game.
Oh, wow.
Bearing in mind, it was a really poor area of Papua New Guinea, and they couldn't even afford shoes, some of them. Like, they would share boots like to kick with. They played on virtually concrete. It was crazy. They were rugby league mad, and yet over 7,000 people came and watched our game. And actually, that was culturally, I know this is supposed to quick fire, but culturally, that was a real strong lesson I learned of how powerful sport can be, because in Papua New Guinea, women are very much second-class citizens. They're not provided with the same opportunities women are in our country. And to see the fact that they could see past that we were females, but that it was this sport that they loved, and they were willing to spend the very little money they had to come and watch us and value us as athletes. They could see past females, and they have lots of violence and sexual assaults in Papua New Guinea. So I feel like that was powerful to me in terms of how sport can change culture as well. But I'm just going to give a short answer on place and go Sydney.
And the last one, so given your sort of vast experience of working with different people or different backgrounds, any advice for people that are starting to either to build or lead a sort of culturally diverse team?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I've sort of already said it, but I've learned a lot from coaches and how they manage us. And I think, if you care about the individuals and you get to know them and you understand their motivations, I think you can get the best out of any team you work with. Not everybody's the same. When we're in our team, you have to speak to, communicate with, deal with each player differently. You can't just have the same approach to everybody. So for me, that's what it is. It's making sure that you understand the people and their motivations, because you'll get the best out of them.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree, sort of creating that that environment where everybody can feel part of it. I think rugby league's probably one of the best sports for being so inclusive of everyone. And on a rugby team, everybody, no matter what sort of shape, size you are, everybody's got their own different role. And I think that's just a great place to be, that you think you feel part of it. The environment is so inclusive for you, no matter what background you're from. Then it makes sure that everybody then can thrive in that environment because it is so inclusive. So I think that's, important to, have in business to be so inclusive of everyone. Yeah.
No, the longest quickfire questions
have
ever gone, but the answers were the answers were great. So, finally, how can the listeners learn more? If is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of St. Helens, in terms of the international, in terms of the pioneering you're doing for the women's game? This is your moment. Feel free to plug away.
I'm really big on social media. I love the social media side of the sport, and I think that's a great way to to grow the sport, for people to get sort of an extra insight and get to know the players, learn a bit about the team and get to know the background. So I would definitely plug the Saints social media. They've also just recently launched today a women's rugby league channel.
We'll try and get here.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay.
He'll say, he'll give the details of that here.
Yeah, so Saints Women, Women's Rugby League channel, which is just player-led, and it's all about, you know, sort of what the players get up to on a day-to-day, a bit about their lives, a bit about the sport. So if you are interested in Women's Rugby League, that's a great place to go and find out more about it.
Yeah, and if you want to come and watch us, we're in action this weekend, aren't we, in the quarterfinals at Thatterweave, because it's not stopped raining for pretty much 4 months. So we're struggling at the stadium at the minute. But yeah, pretty much all the fixtures are on the Saints website for the women. So if anyone fancies getting down to a game, we'd love to hopefully excite you on the field.
Thank you so much. I guess it's summarising the conversation today, that there are countless similarities between sport and business, but having the opportunity to speak to both Jodie and Emily, there's probably more similarities than maybe we first realised. The level of attention to detail, the strategy and planning, being respectful of cultural differences, learning from overseas environments, bringing some of those things into your own business, your own world, and actually then shaping and changing those and then potentially exporting those for other people to learn from as well. And I think the biggest and probably most touching bit for me is the clear leadership qualities that these guys show, pioneering a women's sport and really doing it for the good of the future generations. I think that has been absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having us. Yeah.